This is Health, Wealth, Wisdom, Parents Edition. Welcome to our summit, where we bring you exciting, renowned experts from all around the globe. Brought to you by Role Model Maker and Dr. Ali Lankarani, affectionately known as Dr. L and the Parent Whisperer. Dr. L is a clinical neuroscientist, inspirational speaker, and international coach, and the head of Role Model Maker and the sponsor for Health, Wealth, and Wisdom Summit. Please welcome back our hosts, Jenny Trask and Kimberly Hobshide, and our next speaker. Take it away, girls.
All righty. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting session of Health, Wealth, and Wisdom Parents Edition Summit. It's looking like we are having a couple of technical difficulties with our speaker. Speaker, if you are out there in the audience, please just type in the chat that you are in the audience and we will bring you up as a panelist. It looks like we are missing the beautiful Sandra Gilliard, who is going to be the speaker for this session. So sometimes it happens. Sometimes our audience, our speakers get stuck in the audience and instead of as an attendee, as a panelist. So it does happen on occasion. So we will give it a couple minutes here and see if she does pop in as an attendee. Oh, 1 second. Okay, how's that? Is my mic better? Is that better at all? All right. Cool. Thanks, guys. So, guys, we have our beautiful tech team here that's helping me out with my microphone issues. My microphone just likes to switch on and off, and it's like a little tap dance. So, all righty. So it's looking like we don't have Sandra in the audience right at the moment right now. So we're going to give it a couple more minutes here and see if we are able to work through these technical issues with her. And if not, then I will also speak on raising your voice to raise your visibility. She and I have probably a few different takes on the subject, but it's definitely something that I'm passionate about, and I'm happy to take this ball and run with it here in just a moment. So we're going to give her just a couple more minutes and see if she pops in. So first of all, big thanks to all of you out there in the audience for hanging out with us today, for taking the time out of your schedule to learn some things. If you've learned something valuable, I'd love to hear it in the chat. You guys are able to chat with us. So if you are an attendee out there in the audience and you would like to tell us something that you learned today that was valuable, I would love to hear it. I know I learned some pretty cool things. If anybody was on my session with Dr. Brant Courtright, that was amazing, like totally amazing. I learned all about all of these neurotoxins that are out there in the world, and a bunch of different ways to combat them and to help our neurogenesis with his 4 pillars. If I can remember them right, they were, let's see, what did we have? We had, oh my gosh, somebody help me out that was in that session with me. There were 4 pillars, and they were like, we had, gut health. I know gut health was one. I'm going backwards. Like gut health was one. What was it? Anti-inflammatory. Yeah, ketogenic, right? Neurogenic, ketogenic, and anti-inflammatory, and then gut health were like the 4 pillars of creating neurogenesis in your brain. So I was like, yeah, this is a super cool. It was like a really, really, really great session. So, all right, guys, it looks like we are missing Sandra. So I'm going to go ahead and take this ball and run with it and talk a little bit about increasing your visibility by raising your voice. So again, it is something that is actually near and dear to my heart. Oh, there she is. There she is. Yay, Sandra.
Hi, how are you? It went to spam.
Oh, no worries. Girl, look, it's fine. We've been tap dancing over here. I was like, well, I'm going to take this ball and roll with it here in just a second, but it's all good.
Well, you just go right ahead. How are you?
You're here and we're all good. All right.
Wonderful.
So, guys, I am super excited to welcome to the stage Sandra Gilliard. Is it Gilliard? Is that the right way to say your last name?
That's
okay,
correct.
Perfect. So Sandra Gilliard is a professional storyteller and personal transformation leader. She founded Femininely Free in 2019. Although the company was formally launched that year, it was 20 years in the making. The seeds for Femininely Free were planted when Sandra began to take notice of how women were marginalized and overlooked in the corporate environment. Witnessing how overt gender bias was in the workplace, she began to develop an understanding of how these biases played out in the social and cultural arenas. understanding how persuasive narratives and stories are in shaping perceptions, expectations, and beliefs. She honed in on the necessity to reframe the stories and narratives about women. Sandra launched Femininely Free to ignite a movement through coaching, teaching, and storytelling. She hopes to disrupt gender biases and deconstruct the patriarchal system by reframing the narratives that define women and the feminine. And she has a free gift for you guys that we're going to show at the end of the session here.
Okay.
But Sandra, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us, and I really am excited for this talk. I'm excited for what you're doing in the world as well. Do you want to start by just telling us a little bit about how you came to be so passionate about this subject and how you came to speak on this subject?
Sure, thank you. I was raised by a group of women, my mother and her four sisters, very strong women, independent in every right. They made the bacon and they fried it up in the pan, and so I grew up, knowing that I am woman, hear me roar, I can do anything. And I realized after I went to college that was fine in my woman-led household. And they kind of, they secured me from all the other things that they went up against. And when I went to college, I went to a college that had just turned to be a co-ed college. It had been an all-male college for years. And so I got to see what a man's world looked like. And then when I left college, I went to graduate school and I was given a book. And the book was called The Game of Life. And it said that in order to be successful, play by the rules. So I did. I played by the rules. I got a wonderful corporate job. I traveled internationally. I did everything but be a woman. And I recognized then that success wasn't necessarily being a woman. It meant that you had to adopt everything that was considered masculine, the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you dress. And there were certain things that I couldn't do once I went into the corporate environment. And I ran into a woman who later became my mentor. She was hard as nails, but she was a woman that had pulled herself up from the bootstraps. She had made it from secretary to vice president, but she said to me there were certain things that were not allowed when you were successful. You could not have empathy. You could not be compassionate. You could not be soft. You had to change your voice to make sure it had a deep canter. So there were so many things about who I was that, from what I was told, were not considered successful. And I recognized that when I went into the work world, there were other women who were feeling the same way. So I became isolated, frustrated, depressed. And I did that for 17 years and decided, this is not for me. My mother, they've come a long way, but they didn't tell us what we had to give up to continue that journey. And so that's when I said that you should be successful no matter whether you're male or female, and you should be who you are and be in that success. So that's my story.
I love it. That gave me goosebumps because that's happened to so many of us. I absolutely had a very similar experience that, I was taught that I couldn't be. There were so many things that I couldn't be. I was too friendly. I was told I was too friendly. I was too personal with, I had too much of a personal connection with clients, right? Same thing. I couldn't be who I was, right? In order to succeed in business, I had to be someone else, right? And I had to be hard, and I had to be cold, and I had to definitely not have empathy. That was definitely one that I learned too. So I am with you. I am totally with you, and I totally feel you on this. Guys, if you're in the audience and you're feeling this in the chat, put yes in the chat that you have felt this as a woman. I definitely am with you, Sandra. So how do you begin to unpack this? How do you begin to, after 17 years, how do you begin to actually, find your voice and be okay with being visible for who you really are?
That's a great question, because I spent most of my life learning how to be successful, learning what I thought was an independent woman, and 17 years in an environment that told me that that's not what it is. But it took me 10 years to come to this point where I now can make the separation that is neither male nor female. It's where your energy goes. And it came from a lot of trial and error. But the one benefit I had was I was a professional storyteller. And I began to use the stage as my platform. And I began to look at the stories, the thousands of stories that I've learned to perform all of them were, male focused. Even when the women were heroine, the story itself was male patriarchy based. And I began to unpack that. And it occurred to me that one of the most powerful ways that we learn our culture and our tradition is through stories. And we feed our daughters stories, even more than our men. We feed our daughters stories. So I grew up in a household of strong women, but guess what the stories I learned? Cinderella, I know Bambi,
Right.
And so I recognized that was a powerful source. And I began to focus on studying storytelling. I really went in depth with Campbell's the Hero's Journey, which I call the Heroine's Journey. And
Yes.
And I looked at that process and I followed that process. I went down to the deepest in terms of where do I fit in and be me. I worked for a major consulting firm, an international consulting firm. My job was to change culture. And how can you change culture and not be compassionate about the people that you're changing? That's when I recognized that there's a difference between, being the methods and then being who you are. And that started my journey. So about 10 years, I started studying stories. I began to look at myself. So it started with the internal journey. And there was a 4-step process that now I look back on. And I recognize that that's what I took. And that's the process I want to share with the audience. First of all, I had to learn. I had to learn everything. And the first thing about learning is to question. We were told not to question our parents, not to question our traditions, not to question our culture, not to question our religion. So we're taught not to question. And when you don't question, you don't begin to open yourself up to look at something differently. Okay, so that was my first step. I had to learn so much. I read a lot. I went back to look at all of the stories about goddesses, and I discovered that they were created by men. So all the things that we emulate, yes. So I had to go back. So my first play was called The World According to She. And that play has been a successful sellout, but I always got pushback from ministers or those who are really with the standard stories. And so I began to question stories. I began to learn about histories and sociologies. I began to look at other cultures to see how were we indoctrinating, our children and ourselves in terms of what's masculine and what's feminine, and the whole notion of how we look at patriarchy as femininity or a feminist. We are so ready to say the word feminist, but most men will not stand up to patriarchy because that's considered, this powerful tool. So learn. The second thing I had to do was embrace a whole new understanding of what it meant to be a woman and what truly was a deciding factor. And I recognize that it's not necessarily a deciding factor, it's the energies that we use, our feminine energies. And femininely free came from the fact that when feminine energies are in the massive amount, that's considered derogatory. So if a man exhibits too much compassion, he's considered weak and soft. If a woman is too confident, she's considered a word I won't say, but she's considered something. So I recognize that we were beginning to mix energies and put in languages on those energies and using that to define. So I had to embody a new understanding of that. And then I had to act differently. So I had to make sure that when I told a story, it was my responsibility to tell it from a perspective that was neutral. If the feminine energies were there, they did not play the masculine energy, but also the masculine energy did not downplay the feminine energy. And then the most important thing for me as a storyteller and as a woman who is really a proponent of femininity is that I had to pass it on. And that is the one thing that women are challenged with, or so they say, that, we tend to be jealous. We don't support each other. We kind of hold on to that masculine notion of what a woman is because we were taught that. And so we hold on more to that than women do, which is why now my focus is on women, to have us release what we've been taught, so that we can do things differently and we can go back into who we really are in terms of being communal, sharing, caring, giving, soft, beautiful. When you look at the world today, if women were empowered because we're compassionate, Mother Earth wouldn't cry as much as she has right now because we're compassionate. And you can be leaders and be compassionate when we come out of that masculine structure of what it means to have leadership, what it means to have money, and what it means to have power. So that, Feminine Free was developed from my understanding of gaining that over a 10-year period.
Wow, that's incredible. So yeah, so it's really about, first of all, like you said, in questioning so that you can learn, right? And then the second step that you said was embracing a new understanding. And then the third step, correct me if I'm wrong, is to kind of tell a new story, right? And
right, take the action of telling a new story.
Take that action, and then step 4 is to pass it on.
And that piece is so key because a lot of times when we're taught, to go internal, it's a me thing. And when you're trying to shift the culture, it cannot just be a me thing. It has to be a we thing. And so the thing you learn has to show up from the outside. You have to show it, you have to promote it, you have to sustain it, you have to share it. And you have to make sure that you act in a way that others can see it differently so that they can internalize it and again, begin to share it. And that's how you sustain culture, that's how you sustain tradition, and that's how you will sustain a transformation.
Wow. Yeah. I love where you're going with this. And, there's so many times that, we as women really have been taught to, the story is like, for example, the story of business is that we've been taught that you have to, it's words that we use, right? That we use these words like that we have to like you have to be a go-getter, right? You have to be I mean, I don't know, there's this whole culture now around being savage. I totally reject that. Like this whole savage culture and like almost like there's a pride in sort of like being super aggressive. And I just, I had a really great talk with a woman named Jennifer Huff a couple summits ago, and we talked about changing that dynamic, right? That as women, we are creators, we are receivers, like that language, right? Of being a go-getter, going out and and getting it, and going out and really and being a savage and being like a killing it and like all that. That's really very male, right? And if we wonder why we're all so exhausted all the time, maybe it's because we're trying to hit energy.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The most important tool that we have for transformation is language. Language has been a tool that can destroy as well as build, and it's how you identify things, how you label things, that is the key to first understanding. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a woman who's an executive at a major California State University, and who was by all standards very successful. She had reached the top of her game, millions of dollar contract, but she really felt that she was not respected for who she was. She respected, number one, for her position, and she was also thought to be hard. I gave her one tip: change your language. So that when you write an email, before you send it out, circle all of those words that can be considered masculine oriented words. So instead of telling your staff that you want to talk strategy, why not discuss a process? Why don't we not discuss a process that we could use differently? And when she changed her language, I got a call from her to say that it was working, that her staff was saying, oh, you can become softer in a good way. Right. They felt more approachable. They felt that she was more inclusive. So a lot of times, language is such a powerful tool that we have. And that's the first thing when you go back to the first step of learn, you have to learn a lot of new things. Learn how to replace words that you were given that were so laden with masculine hardness, like power and, sort of things. And how could you do that? That would be more of a softer, feminine approach. And you'll find out that you'll start thinking differently as well. You'll start looking at things differently. So language is a powerful tool of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to hear some of the stories of, of these kind of transitions that you, like the one you just described, right? Where, because again, it's all about hearing the stories of how other women have done it, right? So
Mhm.
do you have any other stories that you could share that kind of come to mind in terms of, women making these types of transitions into being more feminine and what that's done for them?
Okay, so I'll give you a story of another person I worked with. That this woman was, um, she was considered very masculine. As a matter of fact, the way she even started to dress in more like a masculine way because she thought that that was required by her job, and it was kind of uniform. But she didn't look into herself to see what was it that she wanted to do. How was she? And so we talked about even in terms of colors, like women tend to be more intuitive. So even though, we hear that, gray is a very, powerful suit, blue and a traditional black, but she wore a red suit. Just one simple change. She brought a red suit and wore a red suit. And she said that when she walked into the office, and normally the meetings that were all male, that when she sat there, all eyes were on her. And those who were initially afraid, like who would really shut her up or shut her down when she made a statement, for some reason, I think it was the audacity. I don't think that the color red, I think it was the audacity that she took to come in and break out of the mold. And from that, she decided, if I do something different, I'm not going to die. Wonderful things could happen in her case, that the respect that she got from doing something different was enough of a game changer for her to take that into other areas. So, you start with the red suit, but she began to disagree, in a way that she would not have done before. So,
Yeah, so it can just be as shifting. So what you're really talking about is, shifting things like, shifting our language, right? Or shifting what we're wearing, right? Those small shifts that can really make a big difference.
Yes.
It's kind of funny now that you mention it. I actually had a friend that came to me a while back for some coaching, and she was having a real problem with her staff feeling like she was talking down to them. And it was this simple thing. Her, where she was sitting in her Zoom, she was like above them, like the way she was looking at them. And I was like, you might just try being lower in the frame, because because she was talking to me, and I was like, and I know her, right? And I was like, where you're sitting is really making you look above me, like you're looking down at me, right? But you're right, it's things like your language, your even, it can be what you're wearing can be off-putting for people, right? If you are not really showing up, it's people can see when you're not being authentic, right? And I think that's what's been happening in our world is, is it possible that as women we'll even get into better, higher paying positions as we show up more authentically, because there is something that's maybe rubbing people wrong about the inauthenticity, of what we've been doing, that we haven't been authentic.
And that was the issue with the person with the red suit. I think that more so than, the audacity to wear something different was that she showed up differently because it was a color of her choosing. So it wasn't because, this is what we do. And by no means does that mean that you do not follow, social rules, but it's that you have to look at, what part of the learning experience. And I think that that learning step is such an important step, because you have to know what you don't know, but you also have to know what you don't know correctly. And which is why that learning step is it's the whole process, because she understood that it wasn't so much the color of the red suit, that she discovered that she could do what she wanted to do. She could be authentic when she showed up, and she realized that others were respecting her for that reason. So when we're looking at, what is it that you have to learn? And I'm not saying that you have to go to the bookstore and buy, 50 books on femininity, or what it means to be a goddess, or what it means to be a woman, because most of those things are written by men from a male perspective. And so I'm saying that what we have to do in order to learn ourselves first. learn about you. If you are, ask yourself, would I be doing this way if it was up to me? And if not, what would I do differently? How would I do it differently? That is the first step to, kind of to learn what is it that you have to do. And then also learn the environment. Sometimes, I was in a corporate environment, the only woman, African-American women at that. And I always felt that, I was singled out. But then there were some things that I really couldn't contribute to. So if I was in a meeting and I didn't get asked to, to speak on it or asked to participate, I recognized that, well, that might have been a budget item that I really couldn't add value to. So, if I was in charge, I wouldn't have asked me to speak either because I couldn't add value. So you have to look at your situation. If you think that as a woman that you are being singled out or left out or feeling disrespected, you have to learn, what is it? If I'm in a meeting and I feel like I'm being talked over, or if I feel like I'm not being recognized, how do I raise my hand? Do I have to raise my hand? And if I raise my hand, will I add value to the meeting? And so if you have to learn something to go back to the meeting the next day, if they talked about a budget and they didn't recognize you, I would go back and learn that budget inside out and come back to say, hey, I want to say something about the line item number 10. Because, when we're in that masculine mode, we want facts, figures, value. Those are the things that are important in that role. So you have to go back and, to yourself and ask, how do you do that? Once you get that, you go back and present it your way, because it's the bottom line that really makes the point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I can see, not necessarily assuming that you're being looked over because you're a woman, but examining, right? Examining, is that the case? Is that what's really happening here, right? Or is it simply that I don't have anything to contribute on the subject? Yeah, so I like that you're going a little deeper into the learning piece, and because when you said learn, I thought, oh, like books, like I should go out and get some books, right? But what you're really saying is to really peel back the layers of yourself even and learn more about yourself and what would be an authentic expression for you, right? And how could you authentically bring value to situations, and what would be more, just more in sync with yourself and your values. I think that's encouraging, because like you said, I mean, it's not, there's a lot of different information out there, but if we can seek to understand on our own level first, that's really, it's really powerful.
I think that when we start to talk about, how do we understand a situation, is understand, as a storyteller, I know that there are as many ways to understand a story as there are those who are telling it and those who are listening. And so that you understand that people hear things differently, people tell things differently, and particularly when you start to peel back the onion in terms of learning to understand something. So you look at internally first, that is always your first stop. You look at, how are you seeing things? How are you interpreted based on your experiences and what you know? Then you have to look at the environment. You have to learn the environment, and sometimes you can be in the wrong environment. That's just the nature of it. It's kind of like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. You might be in the wrong environment, and your defense is that it's a patriarchal environment. The systematic structures might be there, but you may be in the wrong environment. So you have to learn your environment, and then you have to learn like where the gap is between the two. So there's like a 3-step process. You're learning where the gap is between the two, and that's when you decide whether or not that's a gap you want to fill, or that's a gap you just, you leave it there and then you move on so that you can be the person that you want to be. And that's a hard decision to make, and sometimes that, when we think about people that depend on us, or for instance, when I stepped out off the corporate track, I had women who fought, for women's right. They were, I'm a woman, hear me roar. They burned their bras. I came off the heels of women's liberation, which is, for me, was a good thing, because that's one of the reasons why I got into school. I got into the all-male school because they were trying to diverse, to have more women. So when I told my parents and, the women in my family that I was stepping off this track, they thought I was crazy. How could you? We worked so hard to get you there. And I just said, you worked hard. Well, but they opened the doors. They had no idea what was behind those doors. And that's what women in our generation now are dealing with. But here's the issue, and this is what I want your audience to think about. So based on recent studies, based on as much traction as women have gained over the past century, we've gained a lot. We gained a lot. We vote. We're sitting in corporates. We're sitting in high seats. I won't say too many C-suites, but we're sitting in different places. However, based on the recent study, it will take us 150 years to get to equality. My daughters can't wait that long. I have a granddaughter that I don't want to wait that long to get equality. And so when I try to explain to the women who have helped me, my mother and my aunts, who can't understand why I would walk out on everything they fought for, I'm just saying that I'm taking your step further. You open the door. Yes, I got a seat. I can go to the table, but I had to bring my own seat. I had to bring my own seat. So I appreciate everything you've done, but you can only see the door. I'm now looking through the door, and those are the things that I'm fighting for, is that, in terms of having women understand now, it's not just enough to have somebody open the door for you. It's now that when you're at that table, you are there on equal terms. You are there being who you are authentically. You are being recognized, and you have a voice.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is I think what you're saying is, we've been trying to be equals, but not from a place of authenticity, right? Not from like, we're pretending to be men, right? We're just pretending to be men, and that's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as sitting at the table in your own power, right? In your own authentic self. That's a different thing. So, a lot of the folks here, I mean, this event is geared towards parents. Are there specific things that you would say in terms of, raising children, and what could we do to maybe improve the situation for them?
Well, as a parent, there are a lot of women who are out now fighting, or holding themselves out as being feminists in the workplace. But I would say step back and look at how are you being a feminist in your home. So what stories are you telling your daughters? If it's still that same Cinderella story, you're perpetuating this patriarchal system. So look at the stories that you're telling. I say stories because stories are so important. You look at the stories that you're reading to your children, and how are they different from the stories that you're reading to young men? The other thing is, look at the language that you use. Do you say to your daughter, "Oh, you're so pretty," in a soft way? And what does that say to her? Doesn't mean that she's not beautiful, but your son can also be beautiful if you're going to look at beauty that way. So how are we, what language are we using with our children? Also, what are the responsibilities we giving our children? Are we still making the boys only take out the trash and the girls wash the dishes? Are we, how are we changing those roles? And then secondly, fourthly, very important is that what are we steering them to in terms of vocations and education? Do we still have these things that we are looking for our sons to do, take over the company or major in math? And how are we gearing up our girls to go in that direction? There was an old saying in my community that women raise their daughters and love their sons, And so I think that when we look at ourselves, like when we look in our household and just take inventory of the language that we use towards our children, if we look at what responsibilities are we giving to them, if we look at the stories and the toys, recently my grandson was playing with his sister's pocketbook, and his dad, which is my son, said, put down that pocket, it's for girls. And I said to him, no, it's not for girls. That it just belongs to Sage. That's Sage's toy. And so you have to start to step in and, how are you doing those things? So I would say that the 4 top things, there are 10 million things that I could tell you to do, but I think the easiest to do, because we do those so naturally, even in terms of colors that we pick out for our children, what color is for girls? Everybody knows pink. Where did that come from? And blue is for boys. I think that's just a tradition that we've held on to. So I would look at the stories that we are telling our children. I would look at the language that, we are using with them, and correcting them when they use language that begins to gender identify. What about responsibilities that we're giving them? And then what kind of modeling are we doing for them in terms of our child rearing?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for all of that insight. We just have a couple of minutes left. There's anything else you'd like to impart to the audience? And then we are going to sort of chat about, I do believe you have a free gift for the audience. So we'll chat about that in a second. But is there anything else that you really want to get out there before we wrap up?
The one thing I want to get out there is that I know that, sometimes that we talk about, you hear women talk about, dismantling patriarchy but men suffer as much from a patriarchal system as women because it robs them of the ability to live full-bodied. When we see a man, as I said earlier, a man who's compassionate, they go in the corner, they cry at a sad movie or, or, they won't allow themselves to be as free and open. And so patriarchal system is not just a system that is devastating towards women, although we get the brunt of it, but it is a system that doesn't allow any being to focus in their full authentic self. So that when we look at what is feminine is always demoralized or demonized. So it's a system that is not just women who are out, but I think to bring more equity and equality, to our society will benefit both men and women because everyone can show up and play full out in the way that they are.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. I definitely want the men to play full out too and be authentic and be comfortable and be happy. So yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that. So Sandra does have a free gift for you guys. She has her 4 steps to leap into power and authority. And you guys can, in order to get that free gift, you guys can send an email to, is it support@rolemodelmaker.com, guys? I think it's support@rolemodelmaker.com to get, and just put Sandra's gift in the subject line and they will send it to you. We would love, send an email to team. Is it team@rolemodelmaker? It can't be a dot. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Is it team@rolemodelmaker.com? It probably is. That's right. I'm going to put it in there. All right, guys. And so for our next speakers up, we have Dr. Stacy Cooper talking about self-love is the key to great health, and Dr. Nazrin Parisian, secrets of interpersonal relationships. So that'll be at the top of the hour. So we're going to take a little break here in just a second. But again, guys, if you would like to receive Sandra's gift, just send an email to team@rolemodelmaker.com and put Sandra in the subject line, and we will send you over her free gift and connect you with her. All right, well, that's about it then. Sandra, is there any final parting words for our audience?
I would just say, as I said, we're looking at trying to bring equality into the world. And I think the best way to be equality is to allow everyone to show up who they are, how they are, and as they are. And that will make us have an equal world. So thank you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. I love your message. I love what you're about in the world. And so guys, we are going to dance on out of here and take a little break until our next speakers come at the top of the hour. So we will see you guys on the next one, and we are going to cue that outro.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was an amazing speaker. We're here with Ginny Trask and Kimberly Hobscheid and Dr. Ali Lankarani from Role Model Maker at rolemodelmaker.com. Dr. Ali is on a mission to support, inspire, and empower as many people as possible to step into their thrive and leave a legacy. Join us at the top of the hour for our next speaker.
Bye, guys.